Charles, another Sunday, and we are back on the mean streets of New York City.
We're going to have to rename this show, Jason.
To what?
Sunday Not in the Basement.
Yes, exactly. Now, Charles, we got a little bit of I don't know if it's a new topic today. It's going to be new information. I mean,
Right.
I was shocked by a lot of this, but it's kind of, it's a common theme that you and I have been through. The thing that's most interesting to me about what we're going to be talking about today, I've been speaking a lot to the audience of Crowdsource the Truth about these ongoing issues with lawsuits. We're
Right.
3 years in to me being sued by a cavalcade of dopes.
Right.
And now we're entering a new phase where people have heard that I've been sued by the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, the guys that give out the Emmys.
What are they? I've never heard of them before.
Yeah. Well, part of the problem is it's been suppressing our broadcasts because before the lawsuit came about, let's see what's going on there.
Just a fire. Garden variety fire.
Right.
It's a false alarm.
So before the lawsuits came about, there was a strike on the YouTube channel, which
Right.
is a favorite tactic of social engineers. And as part of the effort to counteract, this is terrible to have a promotional announcement while the fire department's going crazy, but people can go to crowdsourcethetruth.com to watch our live streams now, Charles, and I hope that people will share that information because it helps these videos get out, and it also allows people to see my interview with David Knight from InfoWars last week.
He's a good guy.
This is absolutely crazy.
It will pass in a second. It's coming from behind us.
Wow.
Should go that way.
Sure. Some kind of big fire going on. I wonder if it's not conveniently happening.
It's probably at the Clinton Foundation.
I was going to say.
Get
But the
rid
point of
those
the matter
records.
is, Charles, people can see our videos now by going to crowdsourcethetruth.com.
Right.
And I'm going to be making a number of changes in the future to try to increase the resilience of Crowdsource the Truth, because all the co-hosts that I work with, including you, are bringing out so much really important information. I think some of the enemies of Crowdsource the Truth are trying to shut the whole operation down
Right.
by attacking the funding source. And what's happened now that's new is that Vimeo has begun to remove certain videos that they've found objectionable,
Right.
oddly for the same vague reasons. They don't tell you exactly what the problem is. There's no appeal process. You can't speak directly to a person over there. And I've just discovered, through sort of trying to work this out with Vimeo, that it's owned by this company called IAC, which you know all about, the Interactive Corporation.
Right.
Also, what do we know about that?
Well, it's interesting. We're going to be spending most of this walk talking about it and indeed showing. We're going to end up, I think, near some real estate that's pretty important to the whole topic. So there's a very famous man called Barry Diller, who I don't know that I think he could be a rags to riches story. It says in Wikipedia that he began his career in 1964 at the William Morris Agency, quote, through family connections, whatever that means. Now that could mean that he has entertainment industry connections, and there is, of course, I mean, there are various, Diller's a common name, so who knows who he's related to. But anyway, he got his start there, was very successful in and around Hollywood and entertainment, and actually launched the Fox broadcast channel in 1986.
Right.
And had a falling out, I guess, with Rupert Murdoch. Careful. And left that in 1992 to have a storied career where today he's a billionaire. Along the way, he created this IAC, which in the 90s, and has bought and sold many legendary internet properties. And IAC today has a market capitalization of, I think, around 10 billion. Now here we have some street life. You've got to keep your eyes peeled here.
Yeah.
So IAC did not, at its inception, have a value of $10 billion. In addition, I think he bought and then spun out XP.
Oh, wait a
operation.
minute. We're getting hit by radio interference here.
Okay.
Okay, it went away. So Expedia, sorry.
Expedia, which is another large today company, and I believe he owns 48% of Expedia.
Wow.
So he's worth a lot of money. And IAC, if you go onto Yahoo or their own website and you look at the various properties they own a large number of properties. You mentioned Vimeo, but they own Fauci's favorite company, Tinder.
It's amazing the radio interference when we start talking about Tinder, but that's an important point. That Fauci mentioned Tinder by brand name. He didn't say it's okay to date, it's okay to
Right.
do online dating. He said, go on Tinder,
You do that Travelocity gnome sound really well.
find yourself a sugar baby on there. I think there's a lot to explore on Tinder, Charles, because I'm joking about it right now, but I honestly believe that there's criminal activity going on Tinder. They've enabled prostitution. There are cam girls on there and porno girls who are just straight out asking for money to do things.
Isn't that like Backpage? I think that
It's very much like
but
that.
it's a more, Backpage was just like a website, I think, and Tinder allows you directly to communicate with prospective dating partners with an eye, and it's not a relationship site per se, right?
Well, I mean, that is up to the user. It's all about introducing you to people. I mean, we could do an entire show about how Tinder has had an impact on society by creating this real sense of disposability.
Well, let's just say you're not going to see any testimonials from like that guy who drives me crazy on eHarmony.
I don't know that
Yeah,
guy.
there's a television ad with this guy who's like so repulsive is not the right word, so beige. And I'm not referring to his ethnicity. He's just like bland, saying, I'm going to help you find your partner for life.
Yeah.
Like, no, thank you. I'd rather eat chalk.
Well, it takes the any of these things have their pros and cons, like any kind of technology. I mean, frankly, it makes me a little sad that we've removed some of the spontaneity
Right.
from, spontaneous living room, Charles.
I know. Sad, actually.
That's a nice furniture set. It is sad, but
I mean, that used to be the crossroad, one of the crossroads of the world. That building right there.
right.
And
Post office?
well, it's now the post office. I think wasn't it a train station before then?
Was it? I thought, well, maybe, yeah. And then it's back to being the train station in
Right.
part now.
Have they finished converting it?
I don't think it's totally finished. I think the phase whatever is done because they have opened up
Yeah,
the
it
train
is.
exits over there.
Yeah, to
but
trains.
there's, I think, another thing going on. And also, we recently heard that Facebook is leasing 750,000 square feet. Now, let's contemplate that for a second, Charles, because as you stand right here, we can see Hudson Yards in the background.
Right.
A lot of people have been talking about Google and smart cities, and we saw Eric Schmidt on the street the other day. What would Facebook want with 750,000 square feet of office space inside this post office building right next to Hudson Yards?
I don't know. That's a lot of space, and in particular in a city that's locked down and could get locked down again. But staying for a sec on IAC,
Real quick. Hey, has there been a big uptake in calls for coronavirus? Has there been a big uptick in calls for coronavirus? Are there more people getting coronavirus now? Is there a surge? Have you seen a lot of coronavirus patients?
Not recently.
Thanks.
let's just get away from that impulsive music.
That's not your favorite song, Charles?
No,
Oh.
it's noise.
Anyway, sorry, we got distracted there for a moment.
It's okay. It's okay. So
Fauci loves Tinder.
Fauci loves Tinder. IAC owns Vimeo. And can, I guess, I don't know what their terms of service are, but they can capriciously, if they want to, decide to kick somebody off Vimeo or maybe change the pricing or act arbitrarily, illustrating the power of big tech in the modern age, that a relatively small number of people and companies control the pipes through which information is disseminated. And it's not a subject that we should consider with regard to a year or even a decade. It's a subject, when we're facing an election, if arbitrarily and simultaneously Vimeo, Google, Facebook, Twitter, and others all decide to shut down conservative voices, or for that matter liberal voices, or communist voices, or whatever, definitely you can influence an election. And we're now at a moment, Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away, or at least the announcement came that she passed away on Friday. So we have a Supreme Court that's got 8 people on it. And
that's perfect if you want to have a hung jury for an election decision.
Well, in theory, it might be 5-3 in favor of conservatives if you counted John Roberts as a conservative, which I don't think you safely can do.
But aren't an even number of people inherently bad for deciding
very
something?
Bad. It's very bad because the way this would work, if a series of court decisions were maneuvered into ending up in an appellate court where the decision was, let's say, adverse to the Trump administration, it was appealed up to the Supreme Court and it was a tie, it would stand at the appeals court decision. And so the same sort of maneuvering could be engineered by Republicans, but we seem to, let's say, Republicans seem to be, because I don't count myself as a Republican, seem to be much worse tacticians than Democrats. So,
I don't know if we're worse, we're just maybe not as underhanded.
I would say less effective.
Right.
Right. And so in IAC, we have this very large company that is public. And you know that when you have a public company, you're selling shares to the public and those shares are being traded every day. It's different than a foundation. You have filing requirements, particularly for large companies like IAC, that are stringent. And you are not supposed to put some idiot on your board.
You're not supposed to do that?
No.
Does it say it right in there? No idiots.
No, well, honestly, the board of directors of these big companies are charged with making sure that management obeys the rules, and they're the ultimate arbiter for whether management should be paid or not paid, whether people should be fired or not fired, whether they should be on the board or not on the board. And the way people are paid these days, these public companies can turn paupers into multi-billionaires quickly. So in 2011, according to multiple press releases and accounts and issuances of IAC itself, IAC decided that it was a genius maneuver to put Chelsea Clinton on its board. And it's kind of the odd duck out. You've got a Bronfman, very famous Edgar Bronfman. You've got people with a lot of private sector experience. And in what's called a proxy statement, you have to explain, the company has to explain, and the lawyers should be checking what are the qualifications of each director. So you want to make sure you get that right. And then as oversight rules have gotten more stringent following the financial crisis and for other reasons,
That's very strange. That sound problem hit us. Here, let me just straighten this out here. That was not happening for a while. Bring it back. Give me just a second here.
Peloton.
Check 1, 2. Okay, we're back.
So what you didn't used to have to do this in proxy statements, say 20 years ago, but recently what you have to do is you have to explain not only the particular qualifications of a director, but you have to explain why you selected the person to be a director, what that person will bring as a contribution to the dialogue at the board of directors. So it's very important that you tell the truth. Now,
It's always important to tell the truth.
well, in this particular respect. And so the first description of Chelsea Clinton is gross and materially misleading and false. It claims, for example, that she joined the board of something called the Clinton Foundation in September of 2011.
I think I've heard of it.
Yeah, well, the Clinton Foundation doesn't exist in New York. And to exist in New York, you would have to have articles of incorporation, you would have to have bylaws, you would have to have filed, registered before you solicited in New York, if you did solicit in New York. You would have to disclose truthfully not only the attributes of your entity, but any defects, if it had been paid fines or been involved in administrative proceedings, if key employees, unpaid ones like Bill, had been forced to surrender law licenses in Arkansas and at the Supreme Court for lying under oath and obstructing justice. You have to disclose that.
What about just accusations of sexual assault? Does that have to be
No.
disclosed? Only actual?
No, but if you're involved in a proceeding. And the Clinton Foundation in New York, there's special rules that are very different. Now, of course, here the carpetbagging Clintons were used to, I think, Arkansas, which has very lenient reporting requirements for everything, and especially including foundations. So in Arkansas, if you want to use a name,
let's let this guy pass us. His
Which
cart
guy?
is just
well,
this guy here
let's
is
go.
making a lot of noise with the cart, delivering Amazon stuff or whatever he's at.
He's going that way now.
Yeah, all right.
So if you want to use what's called a doing business as name, so it's not your real name,
Right.
but you want to call yourself the Clinton Foundation, you can, in Arkansas, you just fill out a form. Nobody really checks it, as far as I can tell.
Right.
And the form actually has specific requirements on it, and most likely there are regulations that amplify those requirements. They include what is the real name, legal name, and address of the entity that wants the doing business as name. What is its purpose, its lawful purpose, and what is the purpose that you're going to use, or what purpose will you use the doing business as name for? Okay, so none of that was ever done properly by the Clinton Foundation at any time. And the rub here is that when you file for a doing business as name in a state, all that means is that you can use that name in the state. If you want to use a name in New York, it doesn't help that you've got the doing business as name in Arkansas. In New York, laws are much stricter. Not only do you have to file in advance to get the name, but you have to file in every county in New York where you want to use the name.
But this is for
The
nonprofits or for any
anything.
corporation?
The Clinton Foundation has never filed, as far as I can tell, in checking with the Secretary of State, to use the real name of the Clinton Foundation. I would submit today is the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation. No other amendment is lawful. So they've never filed, as far as I can tell, to use any fictitious name or doing business as name in New York. And certainly by September 26th or 27th, 2011, when IAC announced that Chelsea Clinton would join its board, the thing was a disaster, the Clinton Foundation. And she was cited, the reason she was put on the board is supposedly from her many years of experience in public service, which, I mean, if they have anything to do with the Clinton Foundation, these are years of experience in fraud.
Right.
I mean, technically speaking, Chelsea Clinton, it's interesting. I warned the Clinton Foundation publicly in 2015, several days after Hillary Clinton announced on April 12, 2015, on the 20th of April, I warned the Clinton Foundation publicly and repeatedly thereafter that they damn well better refile a lot of forms around the world, and they didn't do it. So that's 2015. On November 16th, 2015, they refiled materials pertaining to 2011. Those materials state that there were a total of 4 directors during the year. Until April 29th, 2011, there were 3. There was Bruce Lindsay, who was paid highly in the context of the philanthropy world. There was Terry McAuliffe, who had been chair of the Democratic National Committee and is a political hack.
Gave money to Andrew McCabe's wife to run
Right.
for state senate.
And Skip Rutherford, another political hack, who had spent his entire career as a booster, really, for Little Rock. He was on Bill's 1992 campaign. He headed up the project to figure out where to site the library that was never disclosed properly to the IRS in filings December 23rd, 1997. So he had 3 directors through April 29th, 2011. Arkansas law states that a nonprofit corporation must have at least 3 directors or trustees at all times. Rutherford, the Nimrod, goes off the board on the 29th of April 2011. And the amended filing for 11, which was filed around 16 November 2015, that filing states that Chelsea Clinton joined the board on the 9th of May 2011. So this is a person in the IAC report, and I would guess that Chelsea Clinton is probably reasonably bright, but has gained from white privilege and Clinton privilege and presidential privilege and spoiled brat privilege, and didn't have the common sense to think through and check whether or not her parents' foundation was lawfully organized and operated. So she either was duped, which is possible.
But you told her.
No, well, later I told her. I'm talking about 2011.
Oh, okay.
In 2011, she was either duped, which is possible, or she saw this and said, oh my God, I got to save my parents, and I'll just ignore Arkansas law and New York law and all other law, and I'll pretend, why she didn't say that she joined the board on the 29th of April, which would not have created a problem, to say that she did it on the 9th of May 2011 is insanity.
But is there some
There's no workaround.
Strategic reason why she would have done that?
Well, there's no workaround, because...
Forgetting about a workaround, has she enabled some sort of sinister something by doing
Well,
that?
remember that a challenge the Clinton Foundation had, even as they signed the MOU, what do you want to do here?
Well,
Up and back?
If we want to go check out, we can go in here and I'll show you how I got in there.
All right. Let's try not to get run over.
Yeah, there's no don't walk here, there on that side. Okay. So this is some kind of new park or something. This is all related to Hudson Yards, right?
Well, if I may, Jason, let me
Yeah.
just carry the thought. So, on November 16th, 2008, Bruce Lindsay of the Clinton Foundation and Valerie Jarrett signed a memorandum of understanding that described the Clinton Foundation, naming it William J. Clinton Foundation, in glowing terms. Everything's hunky-dory, it's one entity, everything's fine. In reality, it was fundamentally busted and bankrupt. It was not lawfully organized as a public charity, which was required. There ensued, after the MOU was signed and after the inauguration, furious attempts to restructure the Clinton Foundation. So those attempts began by September 4th, 2009, when they created an entity called Clinton Global Initiative, Inc. All they did was incorporate it. They didn't have bylaws until August of the next year.
Sorry, it's back that way.
All right.
They didn't have bylaws until next year, but I just want, while we're standing here, Charles, I want people to remember that in the very beginning of the pandemic, back in March, right here is where I met that squad of NYPD special operations, whatever they were, and there was not really any kind of understandable reason why they were here. This park has a kind of an array of very bizarre statues in it that people can go and look at older videos to think about, but please carry on with that.
All right, so they tried to restructure the Clinton Global Initiative, Inc. Now bear in mind, Clinton Global Initiative began getting a website in November, I think November 15th or thereabouts, 2004. It held its first meeting in New York in September of 2005, then one in 6, and one in 7, and one in 8. And then they actually held one, Clinton Global Initiative International in Hong Kong, in December of 2008, and didn't talk about that in the MOU. Because what's unusual about having the husband of the Secretary of State fly to China and do all kinds of deals across Asia in a closed-door session in the run-up to Barack Obama's historic inauguration, where his wife was going to be the Secretary of State. There's no possibility that Asian people and crooked American and European would look at that and say, this is great, this is past the hat. we'll go to Hong Kong. No, we'll check, and we'll fill Bill's luggage up with bribes. So
Didn't he get paid like $700,000 for something on that?
In Hong Kong, I'm not sure how much
Maybe
he
that
got.
was something else.
I think that was Russia. Now, we want to go to the mall, or
Well, I thought this was where you wanted to go in. This is, we can't get to the High Line right now
right?
without, making an appointment and everything. And I'm actually seeing, it looks like there is some damage to this camera from that BLM attack. People might see some light streaks that look like perhaps a crack in the lens. But you wanted to enter this sort of...
I just want to show people, is it humming or is it dead?
Well, this
the
is
mall.
Hudson Yards. This is kind of like the newest neighborhood in New York City. But, I mean, when people see this, this is essentially like an entirely new downtown from another city shoved in over here.
Right. So maybe can we go west and go down
Wherever you want to go.
that way? So these are the high-end international chain stores, right? Right here. Sunrise Ice Cream, Hebrew National.
How do you feel about a burqa-wearing individual serving up Hebrew National hot dogs? That's perhaps
Only-
the new Israel-UAE peace process.
Only in New York, Jason. You want a pigeon burger?
No.
It's fresh.
Charles, here we see one of the weird statues I was talking about. It's a gorilla posing rather provocatively.
Well, if that turns you on, Jason, we need to have a long
It's
discussion.
not turning me on. This is King Yanni.
King and Yanni?
I don't know what that's about.
Sorry, let's just keep going.
I thought Yanni was the master of the pan flute. He's a gorilla.
There's Soul Cycle and Equinox.
Right. I mean, there's no shortage of fancy stuff over here, Charles. People can see this is, I mean, multi-millions.
Billions.
Yeah, billions.
This is architects who've been told they can smoke as much crack as they want and we'll build whatever you come up with. But that's dangerous.
Playing on construction equipment.
Not generally a great idea. So is this 12th Avenue?
Ah, damn it, our broadcast cut.
Oh, Jesus.
So we're going to continue recording. Damn it. We've been over here before and not had that happen.
There's a big police station there.
They could be using any type of radio thing at any time. So what we'll do with this, Charles, is I'll put the full broadcast out on the Jason Goodman channel, and then we'll link that to crowdsourcethetruth.com, and we'll also provide it for sponsors on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. But we'll keep going now in a continuous thing. And you were telling us about Bruce Lindsay.
Right. So do you want to go across so we see the river, or or how do you want to do it?
However you want
No,
to do
you're
it.
the guy to figure this out.
Let's stay in the sun for now, and then when we get down to that little Barry Diller Island, we'll check it out.
So the first attempted fix was the Clinton Global Initiative. Now, that thing met in 2009, and guess who spoke there? Barack Obama, who I think learned maybe shortly after or right around the time he spoke in 2009, he learned that he'd won the Nobel Peace Prize for 11 days' work.
Yeah.
So the first workaround was to try to put the Clinton Global Initiative back together, but they didn't adopt bylaws for that thing and file for tax exemption until August of 2011. So it's one of the things that the genius double PhD Chelsea Clinton, if she wasn't going to do it herself, she would have asked a lawyer to say, all right, the Clinton Foundation, what's the state of play with the Clinton Foundation?
Yeah, she knows any lawyers?
She knows a lot of liars.
Yes, exactly.
So she didn't catch, let's say she missed the state of play with the Clinton Global Initiative, which, remember, that to me is nothing more than a grifter's exchange, where you take a charity, limits attendance to pre-selected invitees. Now, you could get away with that if you were a private foundation or maybe another type of foundation than the Clinton Foundation is supposed to be. It's supposed to stand in the shoes of government, be broadly representative of the public at large, and the last thing it should be doing is operating a swinger's pad on top of the library for Bill and closed sessions where grifters come to New York City to meet with other grifter politicians and bankers and consultants and business people. But that's exactly what they started doing by 2005.
Even if you put that in the bylaws, you can't do that?
You can't do that as a charity. You could do it as Teneo. You could do it as a private company. But there what you'd have to be concerned about is the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Are you paying people above market to use their influence to get something from in foreign places?
They're experts at that.
That would seem to be what maybe when Chelsea went to Oxford to get her degree in international relations, she thought it was that thing maybe, and not.
Did Chelsea get a Rhodes scholarship?
She did not. She did not.
Why not?
I don't know. I don't know many examples of parent, offspring Rhodes scholars. Maybe there
Really?
are. I don't know of them. I'm sure
That's
there could be.
interesting.
So that's the first one that she missed, in quotes, to be charitable, as it were. The second one that she missed is the Clinton Health Access Initiative. And the problem for her on that one is that it says in the IAC release that she joined the Clinton Health Access Initiative board in September of 2011. So that's just as the Clinton Health Access Initiative was putting together its audit and its 990 filing for 2010 and 2009. So the biggest piece of the Clinton Foundation, the main Clinton Foundation, whose board she supposedly joined May 9th, 2011, was this CHI. And according to the MOU, it said that CHI sprang into existence in 2002. But that's not true because the main foundation never altered its controlling articles of incorporation to permit it to do anything outside a city park in Little Rock. So while the nice little piece of paper, the so-called MOU, says they were doing this stuff, confessing to charity fraud and diversion of funds, of course. The fact is that it had no authority to do any of that. And so she does her due diligence, decides to go on the board for that thing. Well, the Clinton Health Access Initiative had operations and has operations in multiple countries. By 2011, it had probably operations in at least 20 countries, if not 30. Well, that's aggressive Asian people.
They met up with some people who they know.
But they were sort of...
He's taunting us in some way, yeah.
Anyway, so she goes on the board of that thing, doesn't do her due diligence properly on that, and that thing is putting together its first completely fanciful audit. BKD works on that one, where not a single number is correct, nothing jives with the parent company financials the way they should. There's purposeful omissions, material omissions, and in addition, at this moment, they're still working very closely, Clinton's, with Ranboxy, which is under investigation when you read Bottle of Lies, aggressive investigation by many parties, including Rod Rosenstein, while he's a U.S. attorney in Baltimore, is actually looking at this. So there's a whole bunch of problems with this thing. This genius, Chelsea, doesn't notice that there are no articles, no bylaws, there are no audits, there are no correct 990s, there are no filings with the various states and internationally. She nonetheless decides to go on the board for, quote, no compensation. Now, she does get a very fancy office.
Why do you say, quote, no compensation?
Because she gets a very fancy office in New York. She's flying around private, reimbursed by the Clinton Foundation. She has multiple staff people paid by these foundations. None of these people should have been employed to serve Chelsea Clinton. And about exactly 30 days following Chelsea's joining the IAC board, Simpson Thatcher gets hired to study the Clinton Foundation on October 27th, 2011. And that bill, you can see it on the WikiLeaks.
Look at these guys again.
I know, but let's just wait here.
Yeah.
The Podesta WikiLeaks. You can see it. They're just stupid kids getting high on water. Oh, that water's so pure. So they The Simpson-Thacher is a very prominent law firm, and the team leading the charge and studying the Clinton Foundation is Victoria Bjorklund, Bjorklund, who is the author, one of the co-authors of the famous, for those of us who are nerdy, New York Nonprofit Corporation Law, which is like a tome that goes through and has exhibits that explains the many ways in which, in general terms, the Clinton Foundation was completely operating illegally. So the person reviewing this asked for all these important documents. You can see the requests on WikiLeaks Podesta file. You can see there's a lot of correspondence. If you just punch in Bjorklund, you'll get to what I'm talking about. There are attachments, there's emails, you can put together a timeline. She asked for all this information. She may, I think, have been shading, protecting the Clintons, but she had to know that the Clinton Foundation was a massive fraud by October 31st, 2011. This is just as Chelsea's joining the IAC board, right, because in theory, because she's so smart and she offers a way for IAC to connect with young leaders, and she's learned so much from her globalist perspective, and they cite her various roles promoting domestic and international health and empowerment, economic development for the Clinton family. It doesn't say that, but it should. And along the way from 2011 to the present, this Chelsea gets stock in IAC, which is worth around, you can check for yourselves, it's a public company, it's worth around $20 million.
Wow.
Right, and so getting back to the point that with a public company, you're really not supposed to pay some goofball $20 million
for no reason.
For no good reason.
Well, wouldn't that cause the stock to go down if they're paying all kinds of money to somebody who doesn't help improve the company?
Again, with a stock like this one, where a small number of people have big interest in it, and Barry Diller has a proven track record creating a lot of wealth, you're not necessarily, people won't be thinking that way. They might be thinking 20 million is pretty cheap to pay.
Have a Clinton associated with the thing.
Right. So there's a lot, as in the case of GE, as in the case of any big public company, there are a tremendous number of filings, both on IAC, and then by March of 2017, Chelsea goes on the Expedia board, also controlled by Barry Diller, with the same rubbish on those proxy statements talking about her great experience, which she really didn't have. What's that?
Well, I don't know. You know what? I think this might be the building that has the en-suite parking garages, where every apartment has.
That one? Yeah.
I think that might be it. There's some building that they built where you can drive your Ferrari in.
You looking at that?
No.
Too small?
Yeah, I would never fit in a Ferrari.
This guy's
I think I might. Yeah, he's doing all kinds of things.
So the other thing to bear in mind in this timeline is that during 2011, and here we need to be somewhat careful. During 2011 is when the Obama administration, according to public accounts, began really persecuting the Tea Party. The Tea Party had won the elections unexpectedly in 2010. There were multiple meetings, off-site meetings involving the Justice Department, the IRS, exchanging information, not merely about foundations, but about their donors. And you heard that when you went to some friend of mine heard that a given Tea Party, what they were doing is persecuting, demanding the lists of all the donors to the Tea Party organization and then auditing them personally.
Wow.
Right? Which is a gross abuse.
Pretty aggressive.
Well, it's extremely illegal. And we don't want to go too far away from here, do we?
Oh, I don't know.
We're going over to 18th?
Right.
So
I thought it's all the way on this. Oh, right. Yeah.
So they're persecuting the Tea Party. And meanwhile, Simpson-Thacher is engaged, looking in theory at the Clinton Foundation. It's starting October 27th, 2011. We can tell from the WikiLeaks dumps if you misspell Simpson-Thacher's name with a T in it, you find out that they had a pre-meeting up in Chappaqua to discuss their findings without issuing a written document. Now, they may have issued a draft document and then cut it back, which is typically the way these things work.
But are secret meetings allowed?
You can have secret meetings, but I'm gonna go that way. But what you're supposed to do, I mean, if a law firm such as Simpson Thacher becomes aware of significant criminal activity involving a former president, a sitting secretary of the state, they're
Supposed to increase the retainer?
their child, and multiple donors trading cash for influence in violation of all kinds of laws, even for Democrats, there comes a point where you should resign the account. Just say, you know, this can't help you with, because it comes a point where you become a co-conspirator in the crime.
Right.
And again, this is 2011, before the 2012 election, roughly a year before Benghazi. If the true state of the Clinton Foundation had been known, the chances are Barack Obama would not have been reelected, is my guess. Now, this is getting kind of noisy.
Yeah, that's true.
So what do you want to do? You want to go in one block and come? Why don't we go in one avenue and
Sure.
down here? We'll go down 18th. So now this is significant because getting back to Barry Diller, why would Barry Diller have put Chelsea Clinton on the board?
My question precisely.
So he's a smart guy, very smart guy, and a shrewd investor and tough businessman. But when it comes to charity law, he doesn't know diddly.
Maybe he knows more than we realize.
No, he doesn't. So what they did, he married Princess, in quotes, Diane von Furstenberg, who was a princess because she married Egon von Furstenberg.
Right.
Then had several kids, got divorced, ultimately married Diller. Now, she is involved. She's a very famous fashion person, and I think I don't know how well the business is doing, but it's certainly well known.
And followers on Twitter.
Is it okay? And I think you see her clothes around the world in many different stores. I don't know if it's super high end or medium, whatever it is. I just don't.
Famous.
Yeah. So they created something, they thought, called the.
Charles, look at that. Love fraud.
That's good.
Wow, that's very appropriate for this moment.
That's true.
They love fraud, and this marriage may be a love fraud.
That could be. So, have you married this man? That's pretty funny. Do you see the question above it? Yeah. So, this entity is called the Diller-von Furstenberg Family Foundation.
Right.
So, my first instinct is to punch that into ProPublica. And do you find it? No, you don't. So then I find a reference to it. It's actually the Diller Foundation doing business as the Diller-von Furstenberg Family Foundation. So my second impulse is to say, this is headquartered. We're going to go right to its headquarters momentarily here in New York. Is it registered in New York? Is it like the Clinton Foundation? Did they bother to register it with the Secretary of State? Warner Media.
Yeah, but this is part of the High Line, and they have the Warner Media Innovation Lab. I was not aware of that prior to right now.
Yeah, me either.
But it's part of the High Line.
Yeah. And the
As is
helicopter.
all this real estate development, and that up there, which has now become essentially a private park that you have to be approved by the
Maitre d'.
the squad
Right.
of.
So if I could just, so the more love fraud. There seem to be into that. So the entity, the Diller Foundation, has chiefly been funded by Barry Diller. It is a private foundation, in theory, that was organized or incorporated in Delaware. And the papers that I see, and I would encourage the crowd to take a look at this, by going into Delaware, by going into New York and elsewhere, the papers that I see show this entity as having only one director, that being, in the early days, being Barry Diller, which is strictly forbidden. You have to have at least three. And the thing is not registered with the New York Attorney General, Tish James. And the defects that you can see in about 20 seconds perusal are far worse than those alleged by Tish James against Donald Trump in the matter that led to payment of a several million dollar fine, and in addition, an agreement that Donald Trump and his family would not participate in charitable activities. So, weighing up what's screaming out there for you on this Diller supposed foundation, and looking at Trump, looking at the NRA, looking at some other ones that Tish has decided to go after, right. There's a clear case of favoritism here. And going back to some of our earliest podcasts, I like to focus on business models for something I'm considering. So right. What's the business model for charity fraud, in quotes? The business model for charity fraud is you find people who are prepared to be completely unscrupulous. That's to say, they're going to use an accounting firm that's hopeless, that will, Mr. Magoo and Company. And Tiger. And you find directors who are not going to do any work if they become directors. And what you do is you donate stock, like in the case of Bill Gates, Microsoft stock that he first got for nothing. He got it for, let's say, $10,000 and it's worth $10 billion, and he gives the $10 billion into the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He's able to take a gigantic tax deduction against his income over time. Same is true with Diller. He could do the same thing, and he has multiple stock ownership positions that have gone way up in value. You give those into a foundation, you live in New York, you're able to take a tax deduction against your New York City taxes, your state taxes, your federal taxes. So the stock that you had for $10,000 that's now worth $10 billion, you're getting a gigantic check back
right.
from the city, the state, and the federal government at a time where the various same people suffering from Trump derangement syndrome and inequality concerns are saying that the millionaires and billionaires need to pay their fair share of taxes. Here's a business model,
massive scheme,
where you can retain control over companies and get money back from the government. So in the case of the Gates Foundation, you give Microsoft stock away to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You're taking it from one pocket you control
right.
to another pocket you control. You're getting memos and accounting work done, and you get big checks back from governments. That's a sweet deal. Now
we're on 18th.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're transforming this whole section of the city, Charles. Should we go down here?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, this is pretty unique Dr. Seuss style architecture.
Yeah, we're looking for 555, which I think is all the way at the end.
I see it.
Yeah. So we're coming up on the headquarters of IAC Corporation and the headquarters of the Diller-von Furstenberg Family Foundation. And as I say, Chelsea Clinton, if she was originally put on the board by this smart guy, Diller, who personally picks all his directors for her work, charitable work, as far as working for the Clinton Foundation, she'd only worked for that since May 9th, 2011, and done a piss poor job deciding to get involved with it in the first place. And what then becomes of particular interest if you're running a real FBI is, what did Simpson Thatcher find? What did they choose to hide? Why didn't they push the Clintons to try to make it right, to try to restructure this thing properly? Because after all, what people don't seem to understand here, the Clinton Foundation doesn't just have to deal with with the laws and the regulations. They signed a binding perpetual agreement with the National Archives on November 18th, 2004, representing that the Clinton Foundation would effectively always be a public charity. That is, not be controlled by a family, the Clinton family, and a bunch of political grifters. So they broke that immediately. Well, they were in, here we go, IAC.
Yeah.
They immediately broke that. They were in breach of that agreement.
I just want to say,
they signed it.
No one should pursue anyone involved with IAC. No one should come here and do anything. We're just observing this building. We are not attempting to instruct or compel anyone to do anything. It's just an interesting piece of architecture.
Well, I think the architect is Frank Gehry or however you pronounce his name. He's a very famous architect. This is
Let's
cross the street and look
yeah.
at it. Let's go do it without getting run over, if possible.
So they've added Chelsea Clinton to the board. Barry Diller did it personally.
Right, and she was unqualified to be on the board, and either Diller knew about all these things and figured that if he had Chelsea on the board, that the Clintons, Hillary being the junior senator previously from New York and the putative front-running candidate in 2016, 16, that the Clintons would use their influence in New York to make sure that the New York Attorney General, Cuomo, would not, and Schneiderman would not ultimately look hard at the Diller-von Furstenberg Family Foundation and subject it to the scrutiny that it deserves, frankly.
Or any scrutiny at all.
Right, yeah, exactly. That too.
Is there some sort of connection between that law firm and the FBI?
Simpson Thatcher?
Yeah.
Well, Simpson Thatcher is a very large firm, and so they have people in and out of it, but the general counsel to Mueller, when he was the FBI from 2003 to about 2000, was at Simpson Thatcher and is now a judge.
I'm familiar with that.
Yeah.
She's actually the judge in NATAS versus my corporation.
Right. And so I don't know whether she had any personal involvement on the Simpson Thatcher review of the Clinton Foundation. Careful, careful.
It's a lot of bike traffic.
Yeah, we have the. Thank you.
Okay.
Want to go bowling? Golf?
Do they still have bowling here? Actually, bowling hurts my wrist. I don't want to go bowling. But so, Charles, here's this Dr. Seuss looking building over here. They've really transformed sort of the west side over here.
Oh, very much so.
Built it in their own vision, right?
Scam I am.
It's pretty amazing.
Going that way?
Now, the other thing that's interesting is, and I didn't know about this at all, I never heard of this guy, Barry Diller, before a few days ago.
Right.
But obviously when they started to remove Vimeo videos, which I had understood to be kind of safe because people were opting in to watch those videos. I was using that to drive videos to Patreon and Subscribestar for the sponsor exclusive shows. I want to reassure sponsors of Crowdsource the Truth that we're in the process of eliminating Vimeo, so if there's any disruption in the interim before that happens, I don't want people to get worried. All of the videos that have been made on Crowdsource the Truth are backed up and will be restored to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth once this whole row with Vimeo is taken care of. But what's going on with all the von Furstenberg stuff over here by, the water?
So yeah, there's something called the Diller Island. We're coming up to it on 13th Street, off 13th Street, behind this.
Not to be confused with Epstein Island.
It's
Totally
actually
different.
it's called Little something Island.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And yeah, and then also one thing we haven't gone into it yet in depth because there's so many crooked foundations associated with the Clinton Foundation, but one of them is called Vital Voices, and it's called now Vital Voices Global Partnership. And to square the circle, as it were, I think in 2007 thereabouts, the princess went on the board of Vital Voices.
Von Furstenberg.
Hillary is credited with being the honorary co-chairman of it. However, none of those disclosures, they talk about it in various Clinton Foundation puff pieces, her roles, but they never granularly explain how much money is raised by Vital Voices from what corporations, for what purposes, and what benefits might those corporations have gleaned. Vital Voices is part of a choir of pseudo-charities that try to celebrate women's accomplishments and turn Hillary into an iconic style maven for all her supposed accomplishments. But like the Oscars, which is changing the way in which they allocate awards, they haven't yet they haven't got a real charity rating operation that would say most diabolically corrupt collection of pseudo charities operating in a given state, in a given country, and around the world. They don't have those categories done yet because the Clintons would just basically retroactively and prospectively win every award for going back 30 years and going forward as long as Chelsea lives.
I'm glad you brought up that change with the Oscars, Charles, because it demonstrates how these award shows are able to dictate the direction that these industries go. And Kirstie Alley was, I think, on Twitter expressing her dissatisfaction with these prerequisites that
there's Diller-von.
Yeah, the National Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences had determined we're going to be required to even be nominated. A certain number of, different types of people involved in the crew and the cast based on race or gender or whatever it would be. But I think Kirstie Alley's objection to that was valid, that, art should not be limited by these types of, parameters they want to put in there. But the Oscars are similar to the Emmys in that if they make a decree that you are required to do X, Y, and Z in order to win one, they've got influence over the industry. And I want to bring people back to this whole thing where we've got these big companies using expensive lawyers to try to attack Crowdsource the Truth, because that's been one of my allegations, that the guy who runs the Emmys there, who arguably is connected to some of these people. We haven't mentioned that Barry Diller is also a member of the Television Hall of Fame, which is part of the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences.
Now, over here we have Diller Island, okay? And this, to me, this supposedly is going to cost $250 million. And my reaction to that is I look at this and I say, why didn't they take $250 million and use it to attempt to solve the homeless problem here in New York City? I mean, this to me is a monstrous set of carbuncles, as Prince Charles would say. I mean, it's nothing nice looking about this.
What is it supposed to be?
It's an amphitheater, and they're going to have, it's a park and an amphitheater, and you're going to do events out here.
But just in time for nobody to be allowed to stand next to anybody.
Right. Now, this, in the old days, this was a part of New York that was really just derelict. I mean, that I think is the old site of a very aggressive gay bar called the Anvil, where they used to do all kinds of wacko stuff in the basement, supposedly.
Never heard of that.
And this whole area, there were none of these modern buildings. There was a big, the West Side Highway was still up, in the 60s, covering all this.
Elevated, you mean?
Elevated, yep.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And
no, you would not come over here when I was in college. This was like a dangerous part of town.
Right. And now it is nicer. So the question becomes, again, staying on the Clinton Foundation for a second. It's one thing if you're in the real estate development business and you want to come over here and you say, all right, look, I'm going to snap up all this land when it's the Anvil and crappy tumbleweeds and stuff like that. And then I'm going to play a long waiting game, and 30 years later I'm going to build all these buildings.
Right.
Without a charity. That's fine. The second you use a charity to be an anchor tenant, as was the case in the Clinton Foundation, on disused land, derelict land in North Little Rock, that changed the whole landscape, and by the Clinton Foundation's pronouncements, created $2 billion of economic value and tons of annual hotel stays and restaurant stays or whatever, because it was a venue. When you look at the economic gain created through the operation of that supposed charity, and you compare it to its true charitable program service expenses, the economic, what's called the private gain, cannot be more than, quote, insubstantial, which has been held to be, can't be more than $1,000 collectively over the life of the project. So if you're bragging in 2004 and 5 that your project created $2 billion of economic value.
That's a little bit more than 1,000.
Right, I think it's a little bit more. I mean, unless you're using new math. So
I don't know about that.
And similarly, down here, this this Diller Foundation and this doing business as the Diller-von Furstenberg Family Foundation, I cannot yet find, and maybe that's just because I'm not looking in the right places, the detailed list of grants that this thing has made, nor can I find enough information, as in the case of the Clinton Global Initiative and the Clinton filings, to see what personal gains Diller and the people around Diller may have derived through the operation of this charity. So I think, again, all charities, particularly large charities, need to be regulated carefully. They should have an auditing firm that's different than the firm helping them, accounting firm helping them with the 990 or the PF form. They should have a truly independent board of directors. It should not be wife, stepson, business partner, whatever. It just shouldn't be that. It's got to be, and it shouldn't be politically connected people. It should be people who understand and will be independent and will take a powerful person like Barry Diller or the Clintons and say, listen, this Clinton Foundation is not meant to serve as a means for Hillary Clinton to seed her 2008 or 2016 or Chelsea's eventual political run. It's not made to be set up so that the Clinton family can have more money. Yeah, littleisland.org.
.org. So that's probably a charity too.
Yeah.
Right?
A charity, it's called a Chino. A
charity in name only.
Exactly. Not a khaki. And so here we are, more of this little island, which is...
But I mean, they love Dr. Seuss, right? This looks like Horton would be hearing a who on there.
It looks like Horton would be dropping a poo on there. So, I think, which way do you want to go?
Up to you. You want to head back up?
I think, why don't we head across 14th?
By the way, Charles, that's the Standard Hotel there.
Is that the one where the people are doing their business while everyone watches? Or is it...
Yeah, that was the dust up when it first arrived, was that you could see naked people in those windows.
And I bet you Harvey Weinstein used to stay there as a bet.
But it's interesting that the Standard Hotel is there at the end of the High Line and connected to the High Line, and these Diller guys are on the High Line and building it.
Right.
Why don't we talk about that? Have we spoken about how the von Furstenberg Foundation, they basically restored the High Line, right?
They restored a portion of the High Line, but again, we don't yet have the kind of granular information we need to verify that that money was actually donated to a charity. We don't have the list, we don't have the amount, and all that stuff you're supposed to produce. So the filings are not complete. And that's a big problem, normally.
Right. It's interesting, Charles. I mean, we see all the same people connected to these projects.
Exactly. And again, when you're talking about the business model for charity fraud in fashion, you never really know how many articles, how many garments are sold for what price. You just never know. There could be knockoff. I'm aware of a situation in India, I think it was with Reebok, where the local manager in India of the whole country's operation set up a remote plant.
Oh yeah.
And basically stole
Reeboks, right?
Well, he stole half the production and sold it on the black market.
Amazing.
Right. So if you could do that in one country with sneakers, you could probably do it with shirts and pants and anything.
Somewhere else.
The second business that's rife with potential for that kind of fraud and corruption is the entertainment business. I mean, you don't know how many tickets are sold.
Well, beyond
actually
that,
sold.
I mean, you pay a particular actor $20 million. You don't know how many people that guy's been forced to hire as his manager,
right.
PR, agent, whatever. So that money goes all over the place.
Right. Right. So here we are at 10th and 14th, waiting for the light. This, again, used to be derelict, dangerous, right here.
That was a car wash forever. It looks
Right.
like it's become something Dr. Seuss-esque.
It's a money wash.
Well, why would they get rid of the car wash? That was like the only car wash.
You could make a lot more money.
Manhattan.
No, there are a lot of them. You could make a lot of money, more money laundering money.
Right.
So,
I mean, I wonder to what extent they've just taken over this section of town.
I don't
Seems
know.
like kind of, they have.
And it's very difficult to get to the bottom of that because under New York law, and under many states, you can own real estate in a limited liability corporation or partnership and have multiple layers, and you have no idea who actually owns this stuff.
So that
one
seems
thing
like
I
that
think
would make it the most attractive business for crooks to get in.
Right. Well, one thing, just continuing along this line, one of the things we talked about briefly, but maybe you can tie it together a little bit. Before, as we were getting into this, the Harvey Weinstein debacle, the Me Too and all that came to light. But what came to light right before he was fairly prosecuted and incarcerated was his practice of using not-for-profits. What? I can see.
Diane von Furstenberg.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, using not-for-profits to produce plays for Broadway, and mixing the operation. Fear is not an option.
Fear
Oh,
is not
come
an option.
on.
Oh, look, and they've got Ruth Bader Ginsburg in.
Right.
Are you a Diane von Furstenberg fan? Yeah? What do we know about Diane von Furstenberg? What? Do you know that she runs a charity that's not properly registered, and she is in all kinds of stuff with the Clintons? No, I'm filming Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the wall there.
Who are these people? There's Indira Gandhi.
I see Michelle Obama. These are women, I guess, Diane von Furstenberg admires.
Is that Bill Clinton in a dress down there?
That would be perfect. I don't see Chelsea in there. But there's Michelle. Do you own a lot of Diane von Furstenberg clothing? Is it super expensive? It's got to be.
It's not too bad. Compared to others, it's not so bad.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Is this the main store, do you know? Ah. So this
Not
is
a
the thing.
not a cheap operation.
No. There's nobody in there on Sunday. They really worked to get that Ruth Bader Ginsburg stuff up there quickly.
To coordinate that.
It's almost as if
Yeah. Don't say it.
we're,
Is that Tesla there?
that is Tesla. We've been down there. Should we see if it's only
Well, we can.
foreign buyers in there?
We can, and then we can go.
then we'll
I'm
go
just trying to
this
get
way.
into
Yeah, yeah. I hear
into
you.
the sun.
Sure. So anyway,
So Weinstein and others, instead of paying after-tax money on which they have to have income, pay taxes, give it to you as a producer to do something, they figured out a way, and have been doing this, not just Weinstein, to donate money, to have investors donate money to a regional playhouse, and have
for
the
plays, yeah.
regional playhouse put on the show, and then if it works, bring it to Broadway, and share the investors instead of the donors, instead of using after-tax money, take a tax deduction, and then you cut these complex side deals where the regional playhouse takes a cut and the investors take a cut. And there was a long article beginning to investigate saying, is that crooked? I mean, is that legitimate? And I don't think it is, no.
nobody's buying Teslas today, Charles.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's buying much of anything.
But the stock still goes up.
That it does.
They got a lot of schemes. It's like no end to the schemes.
Yeah. And then down here, this used to be a part of New York City where you just did not walk.
Well, it was
at
the meatpacking district.
Right. Well, and then they got rid of the meatpacking.
And then it was derelict for a while, and then it became fancy.
I remember in the early 60s when they were still meatpacking, and I remember there used to be on 14th Street.
Even in the 90s they were.
In fact, I was going to say in '82, when I got married January 9th, 1982, we had a bachelor party on January 7th. And I knew of over there on 14th Street, there was a place where you could get cases of beer. Those were the days when I drank beer.
Yeah.
And cold cuts and bulk and all this kind of stuff. And so we got a bunch of beer and cheap champagne and all kinds of stuff over here, and definitely didn't come over here.
Yeah. But a lot of this even, oh wait, Charles, these hands are back.
Yeah, that's the same. Those are people we saw before.
So, I mean, a lot of these fancy places have now gone belly up.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, the post office. I didn't realize we had a post office here. They better defund the post office. Why does the post office need a post office there?
Well, for all these stores.
I guess.
But this is a major improvement from when I was a child. I mean, this is, I wouldn't want to live over here or work over here, but it's certainly a lot better than it used to be.
Yeah.
So Jason, I think this is an important week. I mean, we're now on September 20th. Multiple times Barr has said that before the end of summer, he expects something out of Durham.
2 days, Charles.
Not 2 days. It's end of summer is tonight.
Isn't it the 22nd?
First. No, first.
Oh, well, so what is Barr doing? He lied to us.
Well, I don't know if he lied, but the point is something has got to happen soon on that front. We have I skipped over one detail, or maybe I didn't, but I just want to dwell on it a bit. At the time that the vaunted double PhD decided to accept her directorships, both of CHI and at the entity that in theory was called then William J. Clinton Foundation, the French government was in the midst, the largest donor to the Clinton Foundation, and CHI was in the midst of an extensive investigation while Hillary was Secretary of State of what in the F happened to several $100 million, more than $300 million.
That could be your next book.
What in the F happened, yeah. And you would have thought, I mean, if you were, people I know who are wealthy and whose parents were prominent government figures, whenever a large directorship or some position of responsibility was offered to the child, teams of lawyers and accountants would check it out.
To make sure there's no conflict.
Right, and the third post that Chelsea was insisted on being on the board of, that dog is racist.
They don't like scooters.
There's
one black dog and one white dog living in harmony.
Ebony and Ivory. Chelsea Clinton also is listed as a director of the Clinton Global Initiative for 2011, and it implies, and the filing implies, that she was a director for the entire year, meaning that she came on the board of that January 1st, 2011, but that's not mentioned in the IAC proxy, it's not mentioned in the Expedia proxy, and the fact that Clinton Global Initiative never, its articles of incorporation describe a grifting association, it does not describe anything remotely close to being a charity, did not have bylaws, was not organized at the time it began operations, took a lot of money, never accounted for it, engaged in all kinds of crooked deals, enriched the Clinton family to the tune of $17.6 million between May 2010 and May 2015, where a piece of the supposed Clinton Global Initiative, that again didn't exist, Clinton Global Initiative University, employed Bill Clinton as the honorary chancellor of laureate education or laureate universities, and paid him $17.6 million, a bunch while Hillary was Secretary of State, and in a position to shape the degree to which foreign governments might have gone after this for-profit university fraud. None of that's disclosed anywhere. No audits for the Clinton Global Initiative. And here's Barry Diller saying, the reason I'm picking this 31-year-old, or whatever she was at the time,
business, Charles. I'm not supposed to interrupt you when I see stuff like that.
It's all hemped out. It's out of
wait
hemp.
a second. Before we leave, I just want for a moment to contemplate as we leave the von Furstenberg neighborhood and cross over. Immediately, everything is kind of out of business.
Right. Yeah, this is really nothing has changed here on this side of the avenue. It's more or less the same old. So here's Barry Diller, who's supposed to be smart enough and a good seasoned business person to figure out that Chelsea can contribute something. Remember I told you that Simpson Thacher was hired October 27th, 2011 to study the Clinton Foundation. What else happened on October 27th, 2011?
I don't know.
Supposedly the Diller-von Furstenberg Foundation announced a $20 million gift to Highline.
Ah,
But
right.
the problem is it hadn't been formed by that point, according to the papers that are on ProPublica.
Their charity had.
Yeah. So how could they have announced the gift? Did they make the gift? Why did the city of New York, maybe the state of New York, have to give money to shore that thing up? Huh.
What?
This is, I think, doesn't Chelsea Clinton have an interest in this thing too?
Istanbul Grill?
No, Full of Bull Grill.
I don't know.
The Full of Bull Grill.
Where does it say that? Oh,
It doesn't.
Istanbul Full of Bull. Yeah. Wait a minute. Now, you were just asking a question about something before that. The Highline. So I used to get mail from something called like,
Friends of the Highline.
yeah, Friends of the Highline. And I can't remember if they wanted money. Or I think they wanted money.
Yeah, it would be a shock if they didn't.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's a Friends of the Highline is there are plenty of Friends of organizations.
Right.
You can raise money to support the capital cost and or maintenance cost of government entity or a public-private partnership or whatever. But you've got to have all your paperwork in order, which of course they didn't.
It's something of a brilliant idea in terms of stealing money from something like that, because I have to say, before I found out about all this stuff, I was very positive on the Highline. It's a nice place to go. They created a park in the middle of basically where there was kind of nothing there before. And I guess they're trying to do the same thing with the island. What's going on here, Charles? Is that somebody going into the ambulance?
There's Pixelated 11 police. Oh no, this is where there was, there's somebody, remember you told me there was a derailment
Sack with
here.
tripod, they're giving them away.
You told me there was a derailment here. That's why Pix 11 is.
Oh, exactly. This is where oh my God, they're still taking injured people out of the subway. Right. So apparently, officer, is the subway, how long is it going to take to get it back running after that derailment?
Unknown right now.
Were a lot of people injured?
Very hard though. I'm not sure. I just got here. I apologize.
Oh, no
That's
problem,
okay.
no problem.
No,
Thanks,
yeah,
Sergeant.
they're working down there real hard, so shortly.
Good luck. Stay safe.
Any information about the suspect?
Nope. I just got here, so I'm sorry.
So the newspaper, Charles, for people who haven't seen it, told us that a homeless person allegedly clamped something onto the tracks that caused the train to derail, crash into, or like scrape the vertical, support column there, and create what is frankly a pretty huge disaster in the subway.
Wow.
Knocked out the third rail, knocked out power for all the trains down there. I mean, it's a pretty big deal. It strikes me as something maybe beyond what just a random homeless person could do. How is he clamping something on there? Most homeless people seem preoccupied with getting food, money, and booze,
and
not
drugs.
sabotaging the subway.
And drugs, but clamping anything onto the third rail is something that's
Dangerous. You got to know what you're doing. How does he do that without getting electrocuted himself? And look at all these places out of business, Charles.
yeah, everything. Apartment for rent. The
So,
the crooked knife.
You know what? A friend of mine knows the person who owns this. He's mentioned it, but I've never
It's
been
open.
in there. Yeah, I've never been in there. Well, yeah, I forgot about that. I wonder if those fire trucks were heading over there earlier. That
Probably.
is very possible. It seems like that accident happened just a little while before we started. I meant to bring that up.
So in this coming week, we have maybe some Durham stuff. For sure, we have an announcement about the person who will be nominated to replace RBG. And I don't know if you had a chance to watch the Trump rally last night. I caught it by accident, and it really was hilarious, frankly.
What did he say?
All sorts of good stuff, and he went off script for a lot of it. There were key portions where he had the standard taglines, and he did have two teleprompters there, but
You can tell when he goes off prompt.
he's much better.
More
when he's-
animated, yeah.
But he had this jag that he did, which was hilarious, where he said about the debates.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen there, folks. I mean, Joe Biden, he's not there. I mean, he was pretty bad when he was on. Now he's shot. And so what are they going to do? I know what they're going to do. They're going to take something and give him a big shot in the ass. And that'll perk him up. And maybe you'll be able to make it, maybe you won't. We'll find out. I mean, it was really funny.
There's been a lot of negative news about Joe Rogan, because Joe Rogan had said that he wanted to host a debate between Donald Trump, and Trump said okay. So now there was a story that came out that somehow Spotify
is going to deplatform him or something?
Well, because there are some things that Joe Rogan has said that are being construed by cancel culture as sexist or whatever.
Yeah, well.
It's interesting. When we start looking into some of the people who have been canceled by cancel culture versus those who have done objectionable things and not been canceled, it's interesting how it's a very selective process.
Right. Yeah, be alert. Right. Because you take, for example, somebody like, I believe there's an award ceremony tonight.
I think you're right. It could be the Emmys.
And I believe the host is Jimmy Kimmel.
Right.
And as a younger person, I sort of got a real kick out of the Man Show. I thought that was pretty funny. I mean, it was so outrageous, the kind of stuff that they do. But if you're talking about trying to select as your host somebody who is politically incorrect, I suppose you could resurrect the pre-fire Richard Pryor and put him up there. But Jimmy Kimmel appeared in blackface multiple times.
Fat suit impersonating Oprah Winfrey.
Masturbating
as Oprah Winfrey.
Had multiple segments. What was it, the Jiggies or something? Where scantily clad, big-breasted women would be bouncing all over.
Jumping on the... I mean, look, I don't mind any of this stuff. I think people should be allowed to do whatever they want, and then the audience will decide if they like that or don't, watch it or not.
But if you're going to make an argument that your brand stands for moral rectitude and propriety and stuff like that, and then you choose Jimmy Kimmel as your MC, I don't know.
I agree. They're all a bunch of fakers.
Right.
And they operate by double standards. They're liars, frankly.
When Trump was taking on the fake news squarely, and always, and he's right. I mean, if you contrast the questions that Joe Biden got from Anderson Cooper, versus the aggressive gotcha approach taken against Donald Trump all the time, it's just not close. I mean, here he gets nominated for 2 different Nobel Peace Prizes.
Right.
For 2 different reasons he gets nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize so far. And there's very little coverage of it. Barack Obama gets it for doing sweet F all, and under his watch, Libya goes from being a country that was reforming and in negotiations and discussions with the United States and other parties to stop being a rogue supporter of terrorism into operating the largest slave market in the world. I mean, and they should rescind Barack Obama's Nobel Peace Prize. It's outrageous, just for that alone.
Charles, we may be walking through the largest economic slave market in the world soon to be. I hope that people are noticing what I'm noticing, which is the stark contrast between this part of New York, which we're getting very close to the neighborhood where I live, and the neighborhood we were just in, which has basically been totally refashioned in the image of the Diller-von Furstenberg. That was
globalist
funny, that woman
elites.
Had the dog in the baby carriage. Yeah, but like it's a pretty stark contrast, wouldn't you say?
It is.
We leave that Dr. Seuss world, and where everything is under construction and some fancy, expensive corporate headquarters store.
This used to be Wachovia Bank, and then it was, I thought, Wells Fargo, wasn't it?
It's a Wachovia sign that was. Well, Wells Fargo bought Wachovia, didn't it?
I guess. But so I mean, this has gone from something that was going to be a branch to now it's out of business. This thing is gonzo alonzo, not just temporarily.
I think all pan quotidians, at least the ones that I've seen, have been closed.
Love your French accent.
Sorry. That's the New York version.
That's Fabien will happily.
Pan quotidian.
That's with an N at the end of it.
Yeah.
Heavy N.
It's at least if I'm not trying, then at least I can't be blamed for doing it badly.
You do a better job than I would have done.
But I mean, that's the deal. If you're over here, you're.
Well, I think this is to be nice. I mean, this is a nice part of New York, and
but it's been graffitied and
Right.
burned and smashed and all kinds of stuff.
Right, and that's before we get into what the Nimrods in the city government and the state government want to do by way of increasing taxes and regulation. And
Well, what about that? So people living over here with all the businesses closed are going to have to pay increased tax. I just paid a bunch of taxes, and people over there in Dr. Seuss land are having all kinds of fraudulent tax schemes to save their billions.
right,
And arguably behaving unfairly to shut down Vimeo accounts of their political opponents, striking YouTube videos
Right.
of their political opponents, awarding Emmys to people who promote the conspiracy theories that they like Donald Trump colluded with Russia. No evidence of that.
right.
Trying to enjoin me from talking about conspiracy theories they dislike. Anyway, I won't go into those because I know you don't like talking about them, but the point of the matter is, when there's evidence, they ignore it.
Right. Well, and they posture themselves, both on the right and the left, Republicans and Democrats, as helping the little guy, when in reality they're helping themselves to the little guy's money.
That's right.
So Bill in particular and Hillary and now Chelsea and Kissinger and David Rockefeller when he was alive and others like him concoct all these globalist schemes that sound fantastic. I mean, who isn't for clean water and clean air and arresting the negative impact of natural disasters and trying to alleviate poverty? And of course people are for that. But you're for that assuming that the entities that are taking the money are deploying it for those purposes and not to pay for private jets and fancy hotel rooms and hangers-on to make turn Chelsea Clinton into a semi-respectable person. She's getting favor after favor after favor, and literally she got the IAC job for her supposed good works at the Clinton Foundation, where she never did any real good works, at least for very long. Which brings me to a closing point. I don't particularly care to know about somebody's sexual orientation. I'm just not interested. But I think given what has happened in this city to people in the fashion industry, to people in the entertainment industry who are gay and who got HIV and then quickly AIDS, it strikes me that if you are operating in those industries, whether you're straight or gay or bisexual, whatever, you should care deeply that a supposed charity whose work you praise may have been involved distributing adulterated drugs.
You'd think.
That kill people around the world, but particularly people who happen to be brown-skinned in Asia, in Africa, and elsewhere. That company is called Ranbaxy. And I am certain, based on Catherine Eban's work and my own work, her book Bottle of Lies is a must-read, I am certain that the Clinton Foundation knowingly distributed harmful drugs that not only killed people and maimed people and harmed people, but may have created a set of conditions increasing resistance to more effective drugs that are then going to come in to maybe solve the problem in later years, as Catherine Eban explains in her excellent book.
Medical resistance or political resistance?
Medical resistance. So she goes through a long explanation. I won't try to do walking, but just read her book about how if you send the wrong type of drugs into a population, it's going to change the way the population reacts to drugs generally. And then as a new set of drugs come in, you're going to be resistant to those drugs.
You mean their attitudes will be resistant
No.
or their physical bodies?
Their physical bodies.
Wow.
And there's a high end estimate of the damage that may have been caused by Ranbaxy and others doing this that runs, I think, to like 10 million people per year may die around the world in the future, because it's a very high number. And you would have thought, again, forgetting the supposed sexual orientation of people we've talked about today, just the fact that they've made a lot of money in fashion and media, you would have thought that if they're going to care about anything in charity, they would take special care to make sure they didn't lend their name and their good reputation and give money to a charity that had been supervised by Bill and Hillary and Chelsea Clinton, that had run roughshod over millions of lives around the world, all the while taking credit for the supposed good works. You would have thought that you'd be pretty cheesed off if you'd done your diligence.
You know, we forgot to mention a couple of the other tenants of that building, Charles, like Newsweek, the Daily Beast,
Right.
certain things, entities that have been involved.
Certain attack dogs.
Yes, they're able to use these media entities. I mean, I think a lot of people feel like the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, Fox News, these are all different, but Barry Diller, if I'm not mistaken, was the co-founder of Fox News.
Yeah.
Okay, so now IAC owns the Daily Beast, which either owns Newsweek or vice versa. So there's sort of a very small number of people, and we're starting to identify exactly who they are, that either control directly or have influence over a really huge number of media outlets that can shape people's kind of perception of things. And when somebody comes along trying to share a different perception, that guy just took my picture as I walked by. It's interesting. I don't mind, but I'm just curious.
You can't mind, you're out in public.
No, I'm not going to tell him not to do it, but you know, given that he wasn't taking pictures until I walked up and then he did, that's interesting.
The podcasting is interesting. Well,
I hope that's all that it is, but you know, there's somebody who put out a false statement about, attributed a false quote to me, rather inflammatory, and posted my home address, I suspect in an effort to incite violence against me.
Do we want to end here? Or?
Yeah, we can end right here, but you know, I wanted to say, I have a number of articles in here about, well, should we talk about Mr. Diller's Twitter?
Sure.
Because it's really interesting. I found him on Twitter, and really what's more interesting is the people who he's following. He's following a lot of stuff in New Mexico, which, didn't Jeffrey Epstein have a ranch in New Mexico?
A large ranch.
I'm not saying those are related at all, but that's just a coincidence. He's very interested in nuclear power. Isn't Bill Gates doing something now with nuclear power?
I don't know, maybe.
I'm not sure what his interest is in nuclear power, but I suspect after he learns that I've followed him on Twitter, much like Anthony Fauci's daughter, he's likely to immediately block me. So
I would guess so.
I wanted to show people these various Twitter accounts that Barry Diller is following. He's obviously quite interested in. Project on Government Oversight.
That's a good idea, maybe.
Radioactive Blog. A bunch of people who I don't know who they are. But this is all public information on his Twitter account, at least it was as of earlier.
Well, what we're going to do on Wednesday, weather permitting and time permitting, is we're going to be going back into some of these details in studio so that people can see the forms they've been talking about and do the research themselves. But it certainly looks to me as if there's a lot of monkey business here with IAC. With IAC, unfortunately for them, they have made multiple public pronouncements describing Chelsea Clinton's supposed good works in at least, I think, 9 separate proxy statements, maybe 10 separate proxy statements. So we're going to check those entries for their veracity. We're going to check to see what they may have omitted that's been false and materially misleading. This is the kind of stuff that I brought to the attention of the SEC when I was looking at General Electric. You know, if you're going to go and say the reason you want to invest in this company is that I've got this enlightened board that's connected to the future because it's got Chelsea Clinton on the board, and you should like her perspectives because of all of her great work, and she's supposedly keenly smart, according to the entry, and she appears to have either been duped or willingly cooperated in perpetuating a fraud about a foundation with her name in it. I should mention, the Clinton Foundation is meant to be, as was CHI, as was, I think, Clinton Global Initiative, and as was Alliance for a Healthier Generation, all meant to be what are called public charities. These are supposed to stand in the shoes of government. They cannot be controlled by a family. They're supposed to have a representative board. And from the 2nd of November 2015 to present, the main foundation has had bylaws which, if they were lawful and bit, would give control of the entity to the Clinton family, which is strictly illegal.
That's a big caveat, if they were lawful.
If they were, with regard to the Clinton Foundation. I mean, you see, the issue is you have the original bylaws, and then in the subsequent amendments, you have this weasel language that says any amendments will take place assuming they comply with the law and other portions of the document, and these don't. So you could take the position that the subsequent amendments never went into effect, and the only thing that operates are the original ones. You could try to take that position. I think she was just wandering around. But there's a right mess here. Simpson Thatcher either studied it or didn't study it carefully. And in 2011, when they did a lot of their work, Mark Masvinsky, Chelsea's husband, was trying to raise a hedge fund at the same time. So I think there's a lot of work that was done by Simpson Thatcher. They may not have billed the Clinton Foundation or the Clintons personally for it. That had nothing to do with the Clinton Foundation and should not have been done. And I think people knew as far back as 2011, indeed I think they knew back by October 23rd, 1997, that this Clinton Foundation was merely to be a grifting machine to raise enough money to pay off their legal bills and ultimately then to subsidize the post-presidency of the Clinton family. So with that,
we will dig into that some more. And I hope that people watching will go and visit crowdsourcethetruth.com. People can check out my interview with David Knight from earlier this week. It was on InfoWars. People can see it on crowdsourcethetruth.com. They can also check out the sponsorship opportunities below that counter lawfare fund there. I've added some more sponsorship opportunities, and I'm going to be adding some new gifts for the premium sponsors there, and I'll be announcing that later in the week. But a lot of strange stuff going on at that Interactive Corp. Mighty coincidental when they started sort of removing my Vimeo videos. So we're going to have a solution for that very soon for the sponsors. I want to thank all the generous sponsors that make every show on Crowdsource the Truth possible. And I hope people will watch this instead of the Emmys tonight. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great night.